For centuries, the Temple Mount has been shrouded in silence, a place where myth, prophecy, and history collide. A slab of stone, in the heart of Jerusalem that billions revere, but almost no one truly knows. Governments have fought over it, armies have marched because of it, and for generations its secrets have been locked away beneath layers of stone. But now, what scientists have uncovered beneath its foundations has stunned the world, and this time, there's no way to turn back. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like and subscribe, because this is a discovery so profound that faith, politics, and science are colliding in ways no one saw coming. It all began with whispers, a hidden chamber beneath the southern wall, a void sealed in solid bedrock that no eye had seen for nearly 3,000 years. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't folklore. Advanced ground scanning technology revealed the impossible. A chamber where no chamber should exist. Perfect geometry, human design, buried deep under the mount. Scholars who reviewed the findings didn't hold back. They called it the most controversial discovery of the modern era, a revelation that could shake the foundations of the world's three great religions. And for months, it was kept hidden. Only a handful of experts knew, until word slipped out. To understand why this is so explosive, you need to understand where it's happening. The Temple Mount is not just another archaeological site. It's 35 acres of stone and prayer, revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. To Jews, it's Har HaBayit, the site of the first and second temples, the very ground where Solomon's temple once stood and where prophets walked. To Muslims, it's Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, sacred as the place from which the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended to heaven. To Christians, it's the backdrop of Christ's teaching, a cornerstone of prophecy and fulfillment. But here's the thing. For centuries, no one has been allowed to dig beneath it. Since the 19th century, full-scale excavation has been forbidden. Jewish law warns against stepping unknowingly into the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space of the temple, and forbids disturbance of the site. The Islamic Waqf, which controls the compound, has enforced strict prohibitions against any non-Muslim excavations. And politically, no government has dared challenge the arrangement. The Temple Mount has remained off-limits, sealed by faith, guarded by tradition, and protected by fragile peace. That's why this discovery is so shocking, because for the first time, technology has broken the silence. Ground scans, imaging, and mapping have pulled back the stone without lifting a single shovel. And what they show beneath the surface isn't random geology, it's man-made, it's intentional, and it may rewrite everything we thought we knew about what lies beneath. But the real twist, the first evidence of what was hidden, didn't even come from radar or imaging. It came from dirt. In the late 1990s, during unauthorized renovations, hundreds of truckloads of soil were hauled out of the Temple Mount and dumped into the Kidron Valley. At first, it was treated like nothing, discarded earth, stripped of context, cast aside without record. But years later, archaeologists realized what had been lost, or rather, what had been accidentally given away. And so began the Temple Mount Sifting Project, a painstaking mission to recover whatever could be found from that mountain of dirt. What they uncovered left experts speechless. More than 500,000 artifacts emerged from the rubble, 500,000 fragments of history, sifted by hand, each piece carrying a story. Pottery shards, arrowheads, bone tools, coins from every era of Jerusalem's past. Some fragments stretched back to the 10th century BCE, the time of the First Temple. Others belong to the Second Temple era or to the Byzantine, Crusader, and Ottoman layers of history. But this wasn't just a random scatter of relics. There were patterns. Many of the artifacts bore signs of ritual use. Chalices broken near the base, pottery linked to offerings, small tools consistent with sacrificial practices. These weren't just household items, they were temple items, connected to worship and ceremony. And though the soil had been dumped without records or supervision, the sheer scale of the finds told a story no one could ignore. Beneath the Temple Mount lies a buried record of sacred practice stretching across centuries. Think about it. 500,000 artifacts tossed into a valley as if worthless, only to be sifted back into history. Coins stamped with kings long gone, arrowheads from battles that shaped empires, pottery once held by priests or pilgrims. Each fragment a whisper from the mount itself, refusing to stay silent. And in the middle of it all, pieces tied unmistakably to ritual life, to sacred ceremony. Proof that the Temple Mount wasn't just a symbol, but a working religious engine, pulsing with ritual, sacrifice, and worship for centuries. But the dirt had even more to say. What emerged from the sifting project didn't just whisper history, it shouted names written in scripture itself. Among the debris, archaeologists uncovered something no one expected. A tiny clay seal, a bulla, pressed with an inscription in Paleo-Hebrew. Its message was clear. Galiahu, son of Immer. The Immer family isn't just a forgotten line from the past. It's recorded in the book of Jeremiah as a priestly clan serving in the First Temple. This wasn't random. This was a direct line from soil to scripture, a bridge between archaeology and the Bible itself. And it wasn't the only one. More seals emerged, inscribed with names like Pashur and Shelemiah, both tied in scripture to priestly duties. Each fragment was a piece of ancient bureaucracy, the paperwork of a functioning priesthood that once oversaw sacrifices, offerings, and temple governance. And because these seals were buried in earth untouched since the First Temple period, stratigraphy and analysis left no doubt. They weren't later fakes. They weren't medieval copies. They were authentic relics of the 7th century BCE. Scholars now argue with mounting confidence that atop the Temple Mount once stood a working priestly archive, not just legends, but the administrative heart of temple life. Then came the tools of worship themselves, fragments of oil lamps, chalices, and incense shovels, the instruments of ritual, all traced to the 8th century BCE. These weren't simple household items. One bronze shovel still carried hardened black resin, residues chemically matched to ancient aromatic compounds described in religious texts. This wasn't cooking. This was incense, burned in worship, its smoke rising where prayers were meant to reach heaven. One carved ivory comb, delicate and unassuming, turned out to be even more startling. Scratched into its surface was the earliest known full Canaanite inscription, and it carried a message about ritual purity. For millennia, that comb lay buried in discarded earth, holding words written before alphabets were standardized, words tied to the very concept of cleansing before the divine. Bones were found too, not scattered randomly, not broken by accident. They bore marks of precise butchery, cuts consistent with sacrificial practice, not the rough patterns of domestic meals. Taken together, the evidence formed a pattern. Oil lamps to light sacred space, chalices for offerings, incense shovels carrying burned resins, tools of purification, and bones slaughtered not for feasts, but for faith. This wasn't chaotic worship. This was daily routine, Organized, structured, deliberate, a worship system running like clockwork at the heart of the Temple Mount. But the soil only told part of the story. The ground itself was hiding even more. In late 2022, during a legal excavation near the Western Wall tunnels, workers hit something solid, a partially buried limestone staircase. Step by step, it led downward into a forgotten chamber. For centuries, no one had set foot there. On the walls were the carvings of another age, Byzantine-era crosses etched by Christian hands, altar niches shaped for rituals long after the Second Temple fell. Pilgrims had marked the chamber with their faith, leaving behind symbols of their devotion. But beneath that layer, the discovery turned older and stranger. A lower foundation revealed itself. Massive ashlar stones, carved with precision, interlocked without mortar, their style unmistakable. They weren't Roman, they weren't Byzantine. They mirrored the techniques used in the 10th century BCE, the Age of Solomon, the same construction style seen at Solomon's Gate in Megiddo. These blocks didn't belong to medieval builders. They were survivors from a far earlier time, a foundation sunk deep into the bedrock, hidden beneath centuries of later history. It was the first undeniable clue that beneath the Byzantine, the Roman, the Ottoman, and the modern, something older, something sacred, something from the time of the First Temple still remained. That staircase, descending into darkness, wasn't just stone. It was a timeline. At the top, the marks of Christian pilgrims. Beneath, the foundation stones of Solomon's age. Layers of faith stacked on top of each other, each civilization leaving its mark, but none erasing the last. And for the first time, archaeologists had proof that beneath the religious monuments of today, beneath the dome and the wall, beneath centuries of prayer and conflict, the earliest sacred infrastructure still waits, hidden, silent, and almost untouched. And then the samples came back. Residue from the foundation stones was tested, and the results shook the archaeological community. They weren't Herodian, and they weren't even from the Second Temple. The analysis pointed to something far older, around 950 to 900 BCE. Suddenly, that staircase wasn't just a descent into forgotten chambers. It was a direct passage into the Age of Solomon, the legendary king credited in Scripture with building the first temple itself. The stones told their own story. Each block was cut in a distinct Solomonic style, margin chiseled with smooth inner faces and framed edges, a method that vanished after the First Temple era. They weren't random boulders. They were precision-crafted supports, aligned with the kind of architecture described in 1 Kings 6. Walls and courts built with no iron tools heard on site, every block shaped off-site and laid silently in place. Even more astonishing, these stones lay undisturbed for over 2,500 years. Layer upon layer of history had been built above them. Herodian arches, Roman paving stones, Byzantine churches, Ottoman structures, modern renovations. But beneath it all, untouched, the Solomonic foundation still waited. Experts began whispering the unthinkable. This might have once supported the very outer courts of the First Temple, the space where priests walked, sacrifices were prepared, and Israelite worship unfolded nearly 3,000 years ago. For centuries, skeptics had dismissed the biblical accounts of Solomon's construction as myth, stories embroidered by later scribes. Yet here was physical evidence, cut stone, datable residue, architectural style, all converging to suggest that the biblical record wasn't just tradition. It was memory, carved in limestone. But stone wasn't the only witness. Technology opened new eyes beneath the mount. In 2023, Researchers armed with ground-penetrating radar began scanning the southern edge of the plateau, guided by long-forgotten British Mandate-era survey maps. What they found sent shockwaves through the team. Beneath the limestone surface, radar revealed voids, geometric rectangular chambers where solid rock should have been. Collapsed staircases appeared in the scans, as well as sealed tunnels twisting downward. These weren't cracks or caves. Nature doesn't carve right angles into stone. These were engineered spaces. The scans even aligned with a century-old note, scribbled on a 1910 survey map. Possible vaulted chamber. At the time, it was speculation. Now technology confirmed it. The voids weren't random gaps. They were structured, intentional, built by human hands. One space in particular stood out, a large, intact chamber directly beneath the alignment of what biblical texts identify as the inner court of the first temple. For scholars, this was electrifying. If confirmed, it would mean that hidden below the modern mount lies a preserved portion of Solomon's temple infrastructure, sealed off for millennia, untouched by Roman destruction or medieval rebuilding. The possibility alone raises breathtaking questions. What might be hidden inside those chambers? Ritual vessels, scrolls, altars, or perhaps the very objects that Scripture says were placed in the first temple's inner sanctum? No one knows, but the geometries beneath the stone insist they are not empty myths. And then, as excavators pushed deeper, they stumbled upon something even more advanced. Not just chambers of worship, but a system of water engineering centuries ahead of its time. Beneath the excavation zone, a subterranean water network began to emerge, dating back to the 9th century BCE. This was no simple cistern for drinking water. Archaeologists uncovered plastered basins, channels carefully cut to regulate flow, and pressure-balancing ducts designed to keep water fresh and prevent stagnation. Every surface was smoothed and sealed with lime plaster, whose residue, when carbon-dated, fell squarely into the reign of King Hezekiah. The discovery wasn't just about age, it was about design. The channels weren't random. They aligned perfectly with descriptions from 2 Chronicles 29, which detail the purifying rituals of priests cleansing themselves before entering sacred service. This was living water, channeled and contained with an understanding of hydraulics that seemed out of place in the 9th century BCE. No other known culture in the region had developed such complex water regulation at the time. It wasn't just infrastructure, it was theology written into engineering. Every duct, every cistern, every plastered wall reflected the demand for purity, the preparation for worship, the belief that even water itself had to be ordered, sanctified, and made ready for the presence of the divine. Taken together, the evidence painted a staggering picture. Foundations cut in the time of Solomon, supporting the courts of the first temple. Hidden chambers buried deep beneath the mount, sealed and forgotten, but unmistakably man-made. A water system so sophisticated, it rivaled engineering centuries ahead of its age, all of it converging beneath one sacred plateau. And still, the discoveries grew stranger. What began as fragments of pottery and forgotten staircases suddenly unfolded into something far more complex. A system that revealed the temple was not just a place of worship, but a machine of precision engineering. Water tunnels carved deep into limestone ran with deliberate purpose, feeding basins positioned in perfect alignment with the areas where ritual sacrifices were once performed. This was no improvisation. Every channel was calculated, every flow directed, every drop of water moving exactly where the Levitical laws demanded. In one basin, archaeologists found thick ash deposits layered over centuries. Testing revealed traces of charred bone, soot, and fragments of metal tools. Cleansing fires used again and again to purify implements of sacrifice. It was as if the site itself remembered the rituals, the evidence locked in its sediment. Further analysis revealed drainage systems meticulously designed to carry runoff into sanctification pools below, where priests could wash in water still flowing, never stagnant, forever fresh. Maps reconstructed from the site showed a layout that resembled not a makeshift shrine, but a carefully zoned complex. Each function, purification, sacrifice, incense burning, water cleansing, had its own dedicated space, separated like surgical departments in a modern hospital. This was not chaotic devotion. It was systematized worship, where every element was engineered with precision and every act aligned with divine law. The conclusion was impossible to ignore. The Temple Mount of old was less a monument of stone and more a living organism, built to breathe ritual and exhale sacrifice. It was a religious machine designed to operate at the highest level of spiritual and physical order, centuries ahead of its time. And then came the discovery that shattered silence. In early 2024, a sealed limestone chamber was finally breached, a chamber untouched since the 7th century BCE. As the team carefully lowered themselves into the void, their lights revealed a scene frozen in time. At its center sat a round basin, half buried in ancient ash. Around it, scattered fragments of incense sticks, broken oil lamps, and charred residue told of rituals performed here before the world outside had even imagined Rome, Byzantium, or Islam. But it was the carving that stopped them cold. On the wall of the chamber, etched in Paleo-Hebrew, were words that scholars had only ever seen in fragile scrolls and oral traditions. He who dwells here, his spirit never leaves. The phrase mirrored temple prayers described in ancient texts, prayers meant for the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. This wasn't poetry. This wasn't folklore. It was a direct, physical, datable inscription tied to the heart of the temple tradition itself. The implication was staggering. For the first time, archaeologists had uncovered evidence not just of the temple's infrastructure, but of its most sacred chamber. The Holy of Holies, the space said to have once housed the Shekinah, the divine presence itself, was no longer myth. It had left its mark in stone. And yet, instead of celebration, fear spread. When news of the inscription began to circulate quietly through scholarly channels, it wasn't trumpeted in headlines. It was suppressed. Israeli authorities offered no official acknowledgement. Orthodox Jewish leaders, when informed, denounced the breach as profoundly dangerous, a violation of the most sacred ground on earth. To touch what was sealed, they warned, was to invite consequences beyond archaeology. Meanwhile, Christian groups erupted with a different cry. This was prophecy made manifest, proof that biblical accounts were not legend, but fact, and a sign that ancient promises were inching toward fulfillment. Online forums lit up, pastors preached sermons around the clock, and pilgrimages began forming even without official recognition. Muslim leaders, custodians of the Haram al-Sharif, demanded answers about what was being unearthed beneath their sacred compound, fearing that religious balance in Jerusalem, already fragile, was tipping toward chaos. Science, politics, and faith collided in a single chamber of stone. The world suddenly had to ask, who controls what lies beneath the Temple Mount? Who decides what should be revealed and what should stay buried? And yet, for all the tension, the momentum of discovery couldn't be stopped. Scholars proposed the next step, muon imaging, a technology that could scan solid rock to reveal hidden voids without breaking a single stone. With it, they could see every sealed chamber still locked beneath the mount, without lifting a tool, without crossing a religious boundary. The secrets could be mapped, the heart of the temple exposed in full. But with every breakthrough came deeper risk. Because the moment the world knows for certain what lies beneath, the question of ownership, of prophecy, of destiny will ignite like fire. Is it archaeology? Is it politics? Or is it the return of something far older, something waiting beneath stone and silence? What is certain is this: we are no longer gazing at the Temple Mount from above. For the first time in centuries, we are inside its secret heart, standing in chambers that once echoed with ritual fire and whispered prayers to the divine. And if this is only the beginning, then what waits beyond the next sealed wall could alter faith, history, and the future of Jerusalem forever. This is history unfolding beneath our feet. This is prophecy colliding with science. And this is a discovery that no one on earth is prepared to face. If you want to follow this story as it continues to unravel, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Because what we've uncovered so far is only the surface of what lies beneath the most contested ground on earth.